So after UFC 304, there's been a big shift in the division. There's a lot of contenders that are itching for the belt. We've got a couple of people on hot win sprees like Shavkat and JDM. We've got ex-champions like Kamaru and Leon now, both number 1 and number 2 contenders. We've got Ian Gary surging up the rankings too. We've got Colby Covington sitting there coming off a loss against Leon. Listen, there's this Belal coming in and taking the belt off of Leon has unexpectedly been the best thing to happen to the welterweight division. We're not going to have Leon tying up the division and stalling it out like he did for the last year and a bit, fighting once a year. So Kamaru on his podcast with Henry Cejudo, they went over the future of the welterweight division. Essentially, they discussed who's where, who Kamaru should fight next, if Kamaru should fight a contender or go straight to the belt. Kamaru, being the Nigerian nightmare, he said that he reckons he could, if he had time to get ready by the end of the year, he could go in there and beat Belal by the end of the year. But knowing that the community would want him to fight at least one more contender before, he'd be happy to jump in there against JDM or Shavkat. But he specifically picked out JDM. Henry Cejudo also mentioned that there's been whispers of Ian Gary versus Shavkat. So I haven't heard too much of that. I've heard more Shavkat being pushed straight for Belal. Ian Gary sort of floating out there. There's a couple matchups for him, which we'll go over shortly. But Kamaru versus JDM, I think that'd be a really interesting fight. JDM, he did pretty well against Burns, takedown-wise. His boxing is so crisp, and Kamaru has got a really strong jab, but if JDM can get around that jab and get on in the inside, I could see him doing some real damage to Kamaru, especially because Kamaru isn't that fast with his legs anymore. His knees are kind of fucked. So if JDM can get in the pocket and sort of blitz with Usman, I could see him stopping Kamaru just with his hands. I don't think his footwork would be able to keep up with JDM, and I think JDM might be able to put on a pressure and sort of overwhelm Kamaru. I don't think I've seen Kamaru really fight a pressure boxer like that. He did well against Masvidal, but I think JDM is a whole nother level when it comes to boxing. So that's quite interesting. I'm sure I would really like to see Kamaru fight by the end of the year. I started watching UFC while he was champion, so I've got respect for Kamaru. I now recognize how active of a champion he was, now seeing Leon fighting. Kamaru said something in the interview, just a podcast with Henry. Kamaru reckons that Leon should go up to middleweight because he's got the frame and the fighting style for it, and there's just not too many wrestlers in the top contenders at middleweight. Now, not a bad idea, but paired with Kamaru going on about how he beat Leon for 24 minutes and just once again said lightning struck and Leon landed the head kick. He didn't mention the third fight at all with Leon, where Leon just dismantled him and sort of neutralized everything Kamaru tried to do. Listen, I think Kamaru is trying to get Leon to move up to middleweight so Kamaru can just sort of sneak in there and get this title shot quicker. Because people might actually ask for Kamaru versus Leon again. I wouldn't be too keen on that. I'd much rather see Leon fight Ian Gary or Shavkat, to be fair. But listen, if I don't think it's a good idea for Leon to go up a weight class, and Henry Cejudo almost immediately disagreed with Kamaru as well, said that he sort of struggles with the wrestlers at this weight class. Imagine what people would do with like an extra 15 pounds on him, right? So I'm going to side with Cejudo on this. I don't think that he should move up to middleweight. I think Kamaru is just trying to get Leon out of the way. But also, Cejudo then counteracted and said that Leon should move down a weight class, which I completely disagree with. Leon is a good welterweight. He's very good. People forget already just after this loss, but Leon can be broken, and that's what Belal did. He came out, Belal performed way better than expected in the first 2 rounds, and Leon just didn't really recover. So I've accepted the loss, and I think it's really good for the welterweight division. But yeah, Kamaru should fight JDM. JDM will be ready in September. The infection should be better in September, or well, like August 30th or something is the official date. But late August. I don't know if there's fucking 30 days in August. I don't know. But yeah, JDM versus Kamaru could be good. But yeah, on to Colby Covington. So he was on Submission Radio. So Colby Covington was on Submission Radio recently. Colby was speaking to the host, saying that he felt bad for the fans now that Belal's champion. Colby seems to see the general consensus of what the public think of fighters. I'm sure he spends a lot of time on social media. But Colby fights the same as Belal. Pressure, wrestling, volume strikes. Colby saw Belal execute the exact game plan that Colby would have wanted to. Colby instead got backed up the entire fight. Belal backed up Leon, whereas Leon actually backed up Colby and kept his back up against the cage and threw leg kicks and would cut off the cage against Colby every time. Colby's calling for a title shot, but he needs to fight some contenders. He's coming off a loss against Leon, and before that he beat Masvidal, who was coming off a 2-fight losing streak to Usman. Listen, Colby Covington needs to fight Ian Gary, JDM, or even Wonderboy. If he fights Wonderboy, I reckon he could get the UFC like Colby. If he fights Wonderboy and actually puts on a dominant performance, they would let him fight Belal. Or at least let him fight Leon Edwards again for a title shot. But Colby is actively ducking every single contender in the top 5 right now. And out of the top 5, I think he should be trying to fight Ian Gary instead of Shavkat, JDM, Kamaru, or Leon. Like, what are you doing, Colby? Fight Ian Gary. We know his wrestling hasn't been tested that much. We know you're not going to knock out Ian Gary. But if you can stall him for 3 rounds and shut down that guy's winning streak, then you'll get a title shot. So you're getting old too. You can't just wait around and hope the UFC hands you another one. I think Kamaru's doing the right thing. He's hungry. He's ready to fight a contender. He knows he can beat the champion. Colby's just yapping, and I think he's very jealous of Belal. I think Colby needs to stick. He needs to fight a contender. I'm going to stand by that. He needs to fight Ian Gary, Wonderboy, or JDM. I don't think they're going to give him a Leon Edwards rematch. I don't think Leon would want to fight Colby again after the build-up in their fight. I don't think he'd want to give him that opportunity. So I think we should give Shavkat the next title shot. We could probably, I don't know if we can fit it in by the end of the year, but early next year. It seems like all the cards are sort of booked out. All the main events are sort of announced till the end of the year. December's probably going to be Conor McGregor versus Chandler. I think on that card, you put Ian Gary fighting Leon Edwards or Colby Covington. That would be excellent fight. Even Shavkat. But I would prefer you hold out and give Shavkat the title shot against Belal early next year. Get another number 1 contender fight going on the McGregor card. So Ian Gary versus whoever. Probably Ian Gary versus Colby, Leon, or even JDM, but I don't think so. I think JDM should fight Kamaru. So Ian Gary versus Edwards would be ideal because there's history there. Apparently Edwards might have knocked him out in the gym, apparently with a head kick. MMA Guru reported on that a couple months ago now. So yeah, Kamaru, JDM, that gives a nice little, that eliminates 2 top contenders. Ian Gary versus Edwards. I think Ian Gary could probably beat Edwards. I know that's a bit crazy to say right now, but I like Ian Gary shot against Edwards more so than I do against JDM or Shavkat. So Gary, Edwards, Kamaru, JDM, Shavkat, Belal, and Colby can sit there until he decides who he wants to fight. But I think Colby might end up fighting Dustin Poirier at this rate in a fucking steakhouse, apparently. So I guess we'll see how that goes. But yeah, that's my sort of brief summary of how the welterweight division is going to play out over the next few months. Let me know what you guys think. But yeah, I think Shavkat, next title shot, Kamaru versus JDM, Leon versus Ian Gary, and then Colby sitting there watching from the corner, pulling in Gary. But yeah, thank you guys for watching, and let me know what you think.